Is everybody got a drink in their hands? This talk will go down well with a drink. Okay. Okay. Without further ado, so thanks for joining me today evening. So I'm hoping to chat with all of you later. The topic of this chat was could have been anything. There's so much happening in generative AI, but it's from my own personal experience, my very recent experience. We just launched a product on Product Hunt a couple of weeks ago, and it's doing really well. And the experience and the challenges of launching this product, I wanted to share with you, right? So the product is what we call a multi-modal Gen AI product. So it generates text, and I'll talk about it more. But before that, it's going to be a quick run through of the agenda. Like, I'm going to talk a little bit about myself, not too long. And then we're going to talk about the product itself, what it does. I'll show you a quick demo of what it's capable of doing. Some of the key challenges we faced, and I think that's the most important part of the learning today, is what I think as a product person, the key things that we needed to consider and what we faced and how we could potentially tackle that going. And then my own read of looking ahead in AI, what's coming and what are things that could potentially happen. And some parting thoughts, right? Like where are the opportunities, where are some of the challenges that lie for anybody looking to build something in this space or looking to adopt Gen AI in your own businesses or big companies. So just a few thoughts and open for debates, obviously. And of course, we'll have a Q&A at the end of it. But yeah, feel free to stop me in the middle if you have any questions. We're happy to do some. But like, let's keep the Q&A towards the end, so I can run through my stuff quickly, then we can have an open chat. All right, about me. So this is the guy. So I'm a Xoogler, obviously, a rock star Xoogler, as you can see from my outfit. Don't take that literally. I'm just kidding. So I was in Google for 4 years, 2010 to 2014. I'm almost a decade-old Xoogler now, so I was one of the first few that got away, as my managers used to call me. But yeah, so then I left Google to help another startup build a product and go to market for about 5 years, took them from seed to Series C. It's called vSense. It was one of the first deep learning startups in the space. They did AI for retail and visual search, right? And then I had my own startup journey too. Like I'm a founder too, so I founded Confetto, which started out as an automated social media marketing app, actually using some of the things that we use today in generative AI, but before generative AI exploded, especially before OpenAI's time. So we were trying to do stuff that was not there before. I wish I had started the company today. It would be a lot more attractive to investors, right? But yes, we raised some funds. We did keep going, but when we thought that the monetization opportunity wasn't quite as much as we thought it would be, we pivoted the startup to a 6-figure agency business now. So that's been mainly run by my co-founder. So now I'm helping founders build products, right? So a bit of consulting or actually getting involved in the team. So I've been a pseudo head of product interim for 2 other startups, help them launch their first product or their first deal, first kind of pilot with a client and all of that. So I figure that my passion is in helping early stage startups get off the ground, take that idea to an MVP or more than MVP, right? Like make that a more of a sustainable product, right? So yeah. And then if you want to get in touch with me, of course, there's LinkedIn. I'm sure you all know. Some of you connected with me before the event, I think. So please do feel free to message me or kind of email me if you need anything, if you want to just bounce off ideas or if you just want to chat. I'm always open to that. Okay, let's go. Okay, so about the product itself, what I have my recent experience, right? So Videofy.ai is a product that allows people to quickly convert their current content, which is mostly in text, into videos automatically, right? So lots of people have lots of content that's still, most of the content on the web is in text form, especially the open web. So our mission is to help people tell stories to visual media. So 1B Stories is also a Xoogler startup. The founders couldn't be here today. A good friend, Anurad, basically asked me to help him out in building this product. So and he's also kindly allowed me to talk about it here today. So basically, what it does in a nutshell is, like I said, converts the existing content that you have into a video automatically using a multitude of Gen AI products that we assembled together. Right? I will play this video. It's a bit of a marketing video. Please ignore the marketing message, but like it kind of explains what the product does in a nutshell. So yeah, you can go in and basically kind of put in your content and it converts to a video. So that's an article. You can automatically convert to a video. You can have these AI voiceovers and avatars in the video as well. So like as if people are narrating the video itself. All of that is done automatically from the product itself. So if you will quickly allow me, I'll show you a quick demo, a live demo of the product. Instead of this video, continuing. So this is video 5. What I've done, what I can do with this is I'll quickly show you the user interface. So basically I can take any sort of like article or topic or some piece of text, or I can create a script and convert it to a video automatically, right? This could be, you know, any article that comes in. So today what we'll try is, there's this very spicy article. Of course, there's a lot of articles about OpenAI, but this is interesting too. So, you know, like X is suing Media Matters, left-wing think tank, you know, for moderation criticism. So I'm going to put that article in and quickly validate that, whether we can actually extract the content out of that and it's safe for us to generate a video out of. And then I'm going to just basically go to the settings. We can even translate this into another language, basically. It doesn't have to be in English. So we can do cross-translation. We can add a narrator to it, an AI voiceover as we call it. And we can clone people's voices and make it available. So if you want your own AI voice to be in the video, we can clone it for you. Or we can add a narrator presenter persona, which is an avatar as we call it, and we can add that to the video too, right? So we have these current personas. Let me go and choose one. My MacBook is suddenly freezing up on me. Sorry about that. Trying to scroll. Frozen. Demo blues. Okay, I'm going to just quickly skip that step and go back to my videos. I'm going to show you the video, what it came out as if I did that. Nope. My MacBook is like really sleeping now, right? Okay, so this is a few minutes ago I generated this, so I'm going to go and look at it. So this is the same article that was generated for the same video generated on the article.
Several companies pulled ads from X following Media Matters report and Musk's endorsement of an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory. The lawsuit claims Media Matters manipulated X's service to make it serve controversial ads, exploiting the algorithms and bypassing safeguards. X accuses Media Matters of interference with contracted business disparagement, a claim hard to prove due to the First Amendment. X files its lawsuit in Texas, a strategic move to avoid claims of a strategic lawsuit against public participation. Despite the controversy, X's CEO insists advertisers aren't permanently pulling back, but urges employees.
Got it. So I'm not going to run the full video and bore you out of it, but you can get the drift of what we're trying to do over here, right? So this is something that I just generated a minute ago. So latest trends in generative AI. That's the topic I gave it. So it's not really an article. And then this is the result, right? So we basically creating the script for the video automatically. We're basically picking up the media. And here we have an avatar actually speaking out, the narrator actually speaking out the text as well. Sorry, you couldn't hear it. It's my computer, I'm not connected to a speaker. Okay, so I'm going to quickly jump back to the presentation and go behind the scenes of what this is, right? So go full screen again. Okay. So behind the scenes of video fight, it's a huge assembly of different things that we do, right? Like, so this is one of the challenges that we face. Just building a simple application where we generate marketing copy is a far simpler sort of task than what we're doing here with video generation. With the input processing, we have to parse the content. We need to basically take text and images, extract that. We do retrieval augmented generation, which is basically a concept where if I enter a topic that, for example, ChatGPT doesn't understand, it's not been trained on, I have to go and pull from the web, much like, the chat interfaces inside the Google and Bing search engines do. Pull the latest from the web and then summarize it and answer the question. So we're doing that too. And then we do language detection, and then we have a prompt engine that basically generates a prompt for this video. And then we move to the LLM. In our case, we do use OpenAI, GPT-4 specifically. And we do the text summarization, we do a translation, we do a script generation, we get media keywords recommendations, we get music genre recommendation, and a bunch of other stuff that I can't even list here. And then a media suggestion, right? And then we go and fetch media from all the sources where it's safe to use this media, especially stock libraries that have been properly licensed. And we basically also generate images using AI, using Stable Diffusion, Midjourney, a couple of that, right? And we do a relevance ranking, we do scene matching, which means which media goes which part of the video, right? So that needs to be done too. And then we do the music selection as well from a library. And then we do the narration engine basically, which is a voiceover selection. Which voiceover is suitable for this automatically if the user did not give a voiceover option. Which avatar is useful, and then we generate the voiceovers, we generate the avatar lip syncs, and then we compile the video. We compile the video again with the video generation engine where we have a templating engine, we have a scene generation, we have a layout generation, element generation, we have to generate the animations and transitions. Literally every single piece is generated. The user doesn't have to provide anything, right? Okay, and then final step of it is coming back is video editing, right? So we need to show this to the user. Obviously they need to be able to edit the video, make adjustments to it, then they need to render it, export it, and download it. So it's a pretty complicated sort of like a ensemble of different models, as you can see, right? Like, so there are AI models to do everything individually. There's no one single AI model today that does all of it. And that's our #1 challenge, right? So is this a pretty complicated product? And the key challenges we faced is, like I said, the #1 thing is a lack of a commercially available text-to-video product. And what do I mean by that is, there is Runway, there is Gen 1, Gen 2, it's pretty fantastic. It can create some clips for you, some seconds of clips for you, but it can't compile an entire video. We are very far, we're still a little bit far from creating even a 1-minute video from these text-to-image, text-to-video models, right? And so a lack of a state-of-the-art model has made our job much more difficult. We hope that will change. We hope we are the one changing that. We'll build that model one day, or there's somebody else who can build it, we can take and fine-tune it for our purpose, right? And there's reason for this, basically. When we talk about LLMs a lot, we talk about Stable Diffusion, text-to-image. Some of you were at the Xoogler AI talk, where we talked about a lot of text-to-image with SKLim. Fantastic what they're doing with that. But really, when it comes to text-to-video, there's computational challenges. In order to generate a coherent sort of spatial and temporal cohesive video is a big challenge still for these AI models. But that will probably change in 3 to 6 months, right? If I'm giving this talk in 3 to 6 months, that won't be a case, is what I strictly believe. But right now, state of the art is still not good enough for us to do this. And then the lack of high quality data sets, right? So videos are captioned differently from images. When you give an image text pair, like typically how AI models are trained, you give, like, for example, how OpenAI created DALL-E was they created their own 400 million data set where they gave image and text captions together, basically. So then they could basically generate all these images. They could also understand images much better. But that is multiplied by a factor of potentially 15-20x when it comes to video data sets, basically, because there are frames and the video is changing and it's talking about something else and the transitions as well. So those are the reasons why text to video remains, in terms of content generation with generative AI, the biggest sort of barriers that exist right now for us to get commercially viable text to video models. There are some that create some clips that you can use in some of your videos, probably part of it, but none of them exist today where you can generate out of a 1-minute video even. Forget about long form content, right? Sorry, my computer keeps going back to sleep. Let's see, so moving on. Now, when it comes to generative AI and building a product using generative AI, I think scaling it up is a serious engineering challenge. It's probably 3 to 4x complexity of what I've seen, because I built a SaaS product before, I built ad tech products before, I've been at Google, but the complexity of what we're seeing here is like pretty serious, because there's just multiple points of failure, because you're generating content and generating voices, generating avatars, generating images. So there's multiple points of failure, right? So you need a very fail-safe, redundant model. And it's also very difficult to achieve economy of scale. And I will talk about this a little bit in a later slide. If you're a startup building a Gen AI sort of like based application, your cost margins are going to look, or your profit margins are going to look very different, right? And hosting individual models can be really, really expensive. If you're going to basically rent servers from AWS to host a model to run just the voice generation piece, it's going to be prohibitively expensive. So, but if you rely on third parties to provide that piece of the puzzle for you, then you run a big risk. So just to give you an example, before we launched, we were using this third party for voiceover generation, and overnight we had to switch because they couldn't just handle the traffic after the launch. You know, they couldn't handle the concurrent requests that we were sending them. And this is a very popular voiceover solution provider, right? Like very realistic voices. We really thought that the technology was good when we tested it, and we had beta users using it, and some of them are paying customers. But when we launch publicly, some of these systems just don't scale, and then they just fail a lot, right? And in our, that was, failure is considered like very bad because the user doesn't get a video, which means they think our product doesn't work. So relying on third parties is still a very risky thing if we are building products based on generative AI. So you need to find a way to de-risk that. Okay, this is a very interesting thing for me, because most of new software, like traditionally software always been built using a very UI, UX flow. There's a form, click some buttons, choose some drop downs, enter some text and all of that, right? That has obviously started changing with generative AI applications. Now, obviously you're seeing what is on the right is Runway ML's interface, right? So to generate a particular clip. So their entire editing interface is also available as a text format, right? So prompt UI versus your traditional UI of clicking buttons and changing forms. So as a product person, I found this very, very challenging, because the problem with prompt interfaces is that the user doesn't know what they don't know, right? It's very, and that hence you have people creating even courses on prompts, right? So if you provide a text-based editing interface, like, okay, change this scene to whatever, make this scene shorter, change the media in the scene to a little bit more brighter, like whatever, I can say that obviously, but then you're leaving this to the user's imagination, right? The user has to really learn what I can do. Hence, like, we've seen that with ChatGPT, we've seen that with any other, Midjourney, for example. There are communities, there are threads, there are people selling courses on how to create prompts for these tools, right? So as a product manager, I felt this is one of the biggest challenges when creating the design. We initially had a design which used prompts to generate the videos, but then we realized that for a lot of the people, it's just simpler to stick to the traditional UI and leave the generative side on the back end. And that means that there's not an infinite possibility of videos that they can create, but they can have more control and flexibility of what they do, and it's very intuitive for them, right? And this is a very key sort of, if you're a product person building some sort of generative AI based interface, think twice before you provide a prompt based interface to people. When you do prompt based interface, you have a lot more education, user education that you need to do. You need to run a community of people who share prompts maybe. You need to have like explanations, example prompts that can really unlock the power of your particular tool, right? So that's why we went with, for the public launch, a traditional UI, right? Probably the ideal mix will be both, right? So if you can allow the user, especially when it comes to video editing, right? It's a three-dimensional space because you're editing X, Y, like text content, but also the timelines basically. That's why it's a three-dimensional editing tool. It's very, very difficult to provide that as a text prompt basically to edit that. Right? So that's the challenge with video editing. So for some sort of content creation or some sort of workflows, stick to the traditional UI rather than going prompt based, because that's the trend obviously that we're seeing. Definitely software is changing with this prompt based UIs coming up everywhere, but think twice before you introduce that to your users, especially if the user learning curve is very steep. Right. Okay. And this is another lesson I learned. Designing for asynchronous flow is never the same as designing for a synchronous flow. What do I mean by that? Of course, you say something to ChatGPT, a few seconds it takes for it to generate a full blog post or a marketing email for you. But it turns out in videos, because we're generating so much of the content, you've got to wait a few minutes, right? Like, so if we basically have to scale it and bring it down to a few seconds, of course we'll be bankrupt by now. Anu would probably be not happy about it from a CFO's perspective, right? So the thing is, now as a product designer, we need to basically kind of create an asynchronous sort of design. So some of these things where you're creating more advanced workflows, where you're creating, I give you some inputs and you need to do a lot of work behind the scenes to create the output. You have to build an asynchronous design in your UX automatically, right? So you got to ask the user to wait, give them a notification when it's done, ask them to come back, or find a way to engage those users in a different way. Right? So this is another, I wouldn't say, of course, asynchronous flows have existed for batch processing, for example. If you're processing batches of files, I'm uploading something to YouTube, yes, I've always known that asynchronous exists, but for generative AI content applications so far, most of them have been synchronous. So we're getting to, when it comes to text to video, it's obviously, at this stage, has to be asynchronous. So you need to design the product for that. Sorry, Greg, was that question? Yeah, so it depends on the video length and what they are asking us to do with the video. If they're adding things like voiceovers and avatars, it could take longer, right? Like the more you generate in the video, the longer it could take. So we're trying to, our benchmark is to try to do it under a minute. Yeah, but under a minute, but we're not there yet. We're under about, like, I think close to about 2 minutes right now. But if they give us a very long article, if they choose, give me a 2-minute, 3-minute video, not a minute video, then it could be longer, obviously. Yeah. Okay, and this is another challenge when it comes to especially content-based applications and you're taking that to market. You will have this dichotomy of multiple user personas, right? When I say dichotomy here is because very clearly we saw a very different sort of behavior between these two classes of people that use a lot of these generative AI tools today, which is business owners, obviously, or people in marketing teams, people in small businesses, even others who want to create content, basically using these tools, and then the creators whose livelihood is pretty much content, right? So especially when it comes to copyright content, they are like very, very sort of like, some of them, especially the businesses, are very wary of it, right? So they don't want to touch anything that is AI generated, right? So you got to provide this control and flexibility to the users. For example, we allow them to say, if you want me to automatically suggest media in your videos, where should it come from? For example, the AI generation is unticked. That means that if you feel like you don't want to be, as a big publisher, we work with some of the big publishers as well, and they don't want to go anywhere near any of this copywriting debate, basically. So they don't want to use any of that. So they're saying, okay, only get it from very, very safe, licensable sort of like sources, and I don't want to be in this gray area where it's like copyright not safe, right? But creators, they will do anything. Basically, they are just very hungry for content. They want to pump out more content. And so the dichotomy of supporting these users means that you need to provide more levers and more flexibility to your users so that you can cover different personas in your product. Okay, so obviously LLM is a big part of what we do. I said that we use GPT-4. Of course, we tested GPT-4, which is 3.5. 4 scores higher in creativity, so we went with 4, and that's what we use right now. More expensive, of course. But then what we realized is, before the public launch, we had to switch to Azure's GPT service because the OpenAI's API is actually very unreliable. It'll go down randomly. There's a huge variance in your latencies. If you run a 95th percentile, if you look at the distribution of your latencies, it will look nothing like, my God, this is like the standard deviation is so huge. Basically, it doesn't make any sense. So you cannot really give your users a very predictable sort of outcome if you're using the OpenAI's APIs. Whether that's got to do with Sam Altman leaving, I don't know, but it happened even before that. So the most interesting thing is about 40% of enterprise users who used to use OpenAI's API, and sorry, I could have included that graph here, have all started switching to Azure, which is providing a much more reliable sort of thing. So when we tested out Azure, it was not just in terms of lower latency slightly, lower failure rates, and more importantly, lower variance in the latencies as well. And that's a very key ingredient, because you want to provide your users, they kind of will assume this is going to take a minute. And you want to keep them that consistency of 90%, 95% of your videos generating another minute, and not give them that too much of variations, right? So as a product person, it's a very key reason why we switched to Azure, much like a lot of enterprise users are switching to Azure, right? And that obviously is a big debate that's going on. Microsoft obviously taking away business from OpenAI, also being the largest investor, right? Okay. There are still challenges remain. Obviously, we use chain of thought prompting to reduce hallucination, right? So I don't know, like, I think some of you might have been here for the other Xoogler events. People have talked about the hallucination problems, but hallucination is where the AI makes up its own thing. For example, when we were giving it an article where, let's say it's about a tragedy that X number of people died from a plane crash, the script was coming out as saying, but it was actually 48 people who died, the script was saying 55 people who died, right? So this is a very classical case of hallucination, because we know what LLMs do is they're just trying to predict what the next word can be, instead of basically kind of adhering to the facts. So to make it more fact checking, we basically do a bunch of stuff. Chain of thought prompting has worked out for us really well. Chain of thought prompting means, I don't want to go too deep into it, it's not a tech sort of talk here. But it means that you ask the LLM to explain its chain of thought. Hey, tell me which is the best part of this article that you think is interesting, for example. And tell me now 5 key points of that article. And then you generate a script. When you ask it to do step-by-step instructions, it turns out it hallucinates less. Now, of course, hallucination cannot be reduced 100% of the time. That is a known fact. And then we still have challenges in summarization. For example, in our case, because GPT-4 has a limited context window, 8K, of course Turbo has come out, it has 128K tokens context window, which is a huge context window. But still what we felt is, even in the 8K context window, we give it a very large article that fits into that size, GPT is always going to the first part of the article and overweighting that when it comes to the summary of the article. So some users were always complaining, hey, but the middle of the article is not, this is a very key point in the middle of the article, is not picking it up, or the end of the article is not represented in the video at all, right? So what we have been experimenting with is chain of density prompting, which is another sort of like way to get the LLM to look more deeply into the content more evenly, and then get it out so that the script is a little bit more even for us, right? So this is not a tech talk, so I'm not a very deep expertise in working with LLMs, but these are some of the things that we saw from a product perspective that we needed to do, right? Yeah, so moving on. This is a very interesting thing. So user feedback loops are like super important for generative AI apps, basically. So we have obviously implemented a very simple user feedback loop. Rate that video, up and down. And that's one of the reasons why ChatGPT is so good, because they have that user feedback loop. People upvote and downvote, people copy the text. And ratings are not the only way, right? User actions can provide you a great user feedback loop as well. Basically measuring user actions, which is downloads, for example. And that's one of the reasons why Midjourney continues to be slightly better than Stable Diffusion, because Midjourney has got that users acting. If you've used Midjourney bots before, you would basically give it a prompt and it'll give you 4 small images, and you upscale one of the images to get and then download them. So you are saying which image is the best, and you're giving that feedback back to Midjourney, which is a very critical signal for them to keep updating the models. Some of them have automated RLHF, what we call, like reinforcement learning with human feedback, which means the models are basically reweighting themselves based on human feedback. And it's kind of like a fine-tuning of the models, right, based on real-time user feedback. We don't do that yet, but we want to get there as well, like bring that real sort of like user feedback, which is thumbs down, which is thumbs up in your particular loop. As a product person, that's like number one, you know, like something that is very obvious to the model companies is not very obvious to the application companies. So, but you need to have that in the application layer as well. Okay, don't forget your costs. So I talked about cost, right? So we are getting to a stage where previously when I was working in Vsense, my experience was basically most of the costs or GPU costs was with the training phase, right? We used to train huge deep learning models. Inference is never a huge cost for us, right? Like in the bottom line, training costs go into R&D, but inference costs go into your cost of goods sold. Your EBITDA looks very different, obviously. So we are getting to a stage where computing is basically much more intensive at the inference stage now because of the usage and how these models have been trained. So training costs are going to basically be a fraction of your costs overall, and that is a real impact basically. Whether it's on the user pricing that you're doing as a company, or basically you're basically kind of trying to obviously raise money and you're trying to create what does my GB margin look like, right? So and the inference cost is basically so much compute expensive, then so you're going to have a very different looking sort of P&L, right? So I'm not a CFO, but I've seen this in the balance sheets, and it doesn't look good. So that's where generative AI applications, they can look like SaaS applications, but they do not follow the same margins of a SaaS application. A traditional SaaS application, you would get economy of scale, more marginal, basically, for a marginal cost of acquiring a new user, using a new user. But generative AI applications don't have that economy of scale. The growth, the asymptotic curve doesn't flatten out as much as you want it to flatten out towards zero, right? Like it doesn't. It just keeps like variably going up, which is a very scary thought, because if you think about it, this is a big implication on the world's energy consumption in the world. Because my theory is literally every single software is going to use AI, and that's going to push up the computing power that we're going to